Here's a little investigation. The U.S. and the ATF. The feds are giving guns to the drug cartels. That's right. Your criminal government, the criminals in your government, are now giving guns to the drug guys. Don't believe me? Here you go.
Good evening, everyone. They are two presidents leading a war against a common enemy, Mexican drug cartels. President Obama welcomed Mexico's President Felipe Calderon to the White House today, and Mr. Obama said the two countries are making progress against drug gangs.
To combat the southbound flow of guns and money, we are screening all southbound rail cargo, seizing many more guns bound for Mexico, and we are putting more gun runners behind bars.
But one of the men on the front lines of the drug war is telling a very different story to CBS News, making an accusation that could cost him his job. An agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms claims the agency has a policy that is actually putting guns in the cartel's hands. Here's investigative correspondent Cheryl Atkinson.
John Dodson, a federal agent, says what he was asked to do was beyond belief.
You were intentionally letting guns go to Mexico.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the agency was.
An alcohol, tobacco, and firearms senior agent assigned to this Phoenix office since 2010, Dodson's job is to stop gun trafficking across the border. Instead, he says he was ordered to sit by and watch it happen. Investigators call the tactic letting guns walk, in this case into the hands of criminals who would use them in Mexico and the U.S. Dodson's bosses say that never happened. Now he's risking his job to go public.
I'm boots on the ground here in Phoenix and telling you we've been doing it every day since I've been here. Here I am. Tell me I didn't do the things that I did. Tell me you didn't order me to do the things that I did. Tell me it didn't happen. Now you have a name on it, you have a face to put with it. Here I am. Someone now. Tell me it didn't happen.
Agent Dodson and other insiders say the gun walking strategy was approved all the way to the Justice Department. The idea was to see where the guns ended up, build a big case, and take down a major cartel. And it was all kept secret from Mexico.
ATF named the case Fast and Furious. This surveillance video obtained by CBS News shows suspected drug cartel suppliers carrying boxes of weapons to their cars at a Phoenix gun shop. Those long boxes being loaded into the red car are AK-47 type assault rifles.
He's armed again, carrying another, appears to be 5 boxes of hard-case Pelican that would hold a pistol.
So it turns out ATF not only allowed the guns to walk, they videotaped it. Documents show the inevitable result. The guns ATF let go began showing up at crime scenes in Mexico. And as ATF stood by, watching thousands of weapons hit the street, the Fast and Furious Group supervisor noted the escalating Mexican violence. 958 killed in March 2010, the most violent month since 2005. The same email notes, our subjects purchased 359 firearms during March alone, including numerous Barrett .50 caliber rifles.
Did you feel that ATF was partly perhaps to blame for the escalating violence in Mexico and on the border?
Yes, ma'am. I even asked them if they could see the correlation between the two. The more that our guys buy, the more violence that we're having down there.
Senior agents, including Dodson, told us they confronted their supervisors over and over.
And what was the answer? What did they say?
If you're going to make an omelet, you got to scramble some eggs.
There was so much opposition to the gun walking that an ATF supervisor issued this email noting a schism among the agents. Whether you care or not, people of rank and authority at headquarters are paying close attention to this case. We are doing what they envisioned. If you don't think this is fun, you're in the wrong line of work. Maybe the Maricopa County Jail is hiring detention officers, and you can get $30,000 to serve lunch to inmates.
We just knew it wasn't going to end well. There's no way it could.
Then, on December 14, 2010, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was gunned down. Dodson got the bad news from a colleague.
And they said, did you hear about the Border Patrol agent? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, you know, it was one of Fast and Furious guns. And there's really not much you can say after that.
2 assault rifles ATF had let walk nearly a year before, similar to these, were found at Terry's murder.
I felt guilty. I mean, it's crushing. I don't know how to explain it. I mean,
Dodson and a dozen other ATF sources have all told the same story to Senator Grassley, who's investigating. You've tried to get some answers from ATF. What's been the response?
The response has been practically zilch. From the standpoint that documents we want, we have not gotten them, and I think it's a case of stonewalling.
Dodson says he hopes that speaking out helps the family of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. They haven't been told much of anything about his murder or where the bullet came from.
first of all, I would tell him that I'm sorry. Second of all, I would tell him that I've done everything that I can for them to get the truth. After this, I don't know what else I can do, but I hope they get it.
Dodson says they never did take down a drug cartel. However, he says thousands of fast and furious weapons are still out there and will be claiming victims on both sides of the border for years to come. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
Late today, the ATF said it will convene a panel to look into its national firearms trafficking strategy, but refused to comment specifically on Cheryl's report.
Yep, isn't it good to know? Yeah, so when your Sharon police or your Arizona police or your Border Patrol guys get shot with guns that your federal government gave drug gangs, don't say that I didn't warn you. But then again, you probably didn't care because you were enjoying the fluoride in your water. How's that toxin treating you? Don't thank me. Thank the Sharon Board of Health, because it was only Hitler and I.G. Farben who fluoridated people earlier. So here you go. Here's a little video for you. This is the Mexican president wants to take your Second Amendment away. A clown from another country comes to our country, stands up in front of Congress and says, change your Bill of Rights. You are the problem.
But believe me, many of these guns are not going to honest American hands. Instead, thousands are ending up in the hands of criminals. With all due respect, if you do not regulate the sale of these weapons in the right way, nothing guarantees that criminals here in the United States with access to the same power of weapons will not decide to challenge American authorities and civilians. But I will ask Congress to help us with respect and to understand how important it is for us that you enforce current laws to stem the supply of these weapons to criminals and consider reinstating the assault weapons ban.
Just when I think I can't get any more outrage, something new happens that makes my temperature rise and my blood boil. Felipe Calderon, who clearly stole the election to become Mexican president, who's connected to all sorts of corrupt organizations down in Mexico, is in the United States traveling around lecturing us about states' rights and telling us that police, when they have first contact with an illegal alien for, say, drunk driving or some other suspected crime, can ask for their ID. Okay? While the American people are having our rights trampled on a daily basis, and John McCain and Lieberman are trying to pass legislation where U.S. citizens can be secretly arrested by the Pentagon or Justice Department and have our rights stripped and literally disappear into a black hole because the government says they think you're a terrorist, you no longer have a Bill of Rights, okay? But, oh, the government starts crying about civil rights and lying about what's in the legislation, and Janet Napolitano admits she hasn't even read the bill when she's on the news.
You had a chance to review the new law that was passed by the state of Arizona?
I've not reviewed it in detail. I certainly know of it, Senator. Let me just say this. As you know and are well aware, that's not the kind of law I would have signed.
Because if you've read the bill, you know this is all a giant hoax. It isn't violating anybody's right. And Mexico has some of the most draconian laws against people that come into their country out of Guatemala from Central and South America. Some of the most draconian in the world. But that's not why I'm outraged. Okay, that's bad enough to have a foreign president who's illegitimate, who runs a failed, collapsed state with 20,000+ deaths the last 2 years and crime pouring across our borders, ranchers being murdered. That's not what's got me mad. Can you imagine if an American president, say, went to Germany or China and told them what to do? Can you imagine if the British Prime Minister came here and said, you need to pass anti-Second Amendment legislation. You need to ban assault weapons, all semi-automatic rifles and handguns. That's what he did. That's what he said today to the Congress. In fact, here's the Reuters headline. Calderon urges U.S. to reinstate assault weapons ban and blames us for what's happening in Mexico.
If you do not regulate the sale of these weapons in the right way,
Mexico has a total gun ban for their citizens. So all these different gangs, some government-backed, others that aren't, can have these big wars with each other, and they have kidnappings and people being shaken down. Every time villagers try to stand up against tyranny, they get machine gunned. I mean, Mexico is a nightmare police state that is a black hole of corruption that is now sucking the United States into it. And Felipe Calderon, this gangster, comes to the United States and in effect says, I want the American people's guns. I want you to be peon slaves like the people of Mexico are. I want to be your El Jefe. I'm going to run your life. And Obama went further on the White House lawn. He said that our nations are not defined by their borders and that we're all one people.
In the 21st century, we are defined not by our borders, but by our bonds. So I say to you and to the Mexican people, let us stand together.
This is all about the North American Union. This is all about global government. And they're openly saying that our nation isn't about borders and that we transcend borders now. We're all one big world. Yeah, under global corporate rule that seeks to disarm the American people. I've always told you folks that the people pouring in from Mexico have been filled with an anti-American fervor. They've been taught that the Southwest belongs to Aztlan and was stolen. And they've been taught to be anti-Second Amendment. I mean, can't they see that they've been disarmed in their country and that we're not going to be disarmed here? That's my number one reason for being against open borders and this unlimited illegal immigration is because over 90% of these people, when they finally become citizens and vote in recent years, are voting to take my guns. Look, I'm not your slave. You're not getting my guns. And that's why the sleeping giant that is America is rising. That's why Rand Paul beat the Republican establishment candidate in Kentucky, despite all the big bank financing. That's why the Republican incumbent senator just lost to a true patriot Tea Partier in Utah. That's why Arlen Specter, Magic Bullet, Specter is out. All incumbents are in trouble in both parties. You're going to be out of office, and your electronic voting machines aren't going to stop us because when there's a landslide, they have trouble, carrying out the fraud. And we are going to defend this nation. And I want to ask Hispanic Americans this, because I've seen polls as high as 79% of Hispanic Americans want to be Americans. They love the American flag. They love the Bill of Rights. They love private property. They understand what's happening. Do you want Felipe Calderon coming up here and saying, I'm your El Jefe, and I represent you, and you work for me as a political weapon of Mexico inside the United States, teamed up with Washington and the big banks to break up the country? I mean, even if the Southwest was Mexico, it was also Spain, it was also Russia, and California, it was also France. I mean, nobody could hold it until Western settlers came in. But even if there is some fake claim to that, the Native Americans are the ones that really have the true claim. So what? I mean, look at Mexico. Why are they fleeing to come up here, where we have private property, where we have the Second Amendment? This is incredible. We have the Mexican president up here saying, you will get rid of the borders. You will have blanket amnesty. I represent my people up here. This thug, this crook. Get the hell out of our country, Calderon. Get the hell out of the United States. It's time for Americans of all race, colors, and creeds to choose sides. America hasn't been perfect, but it's the best country in the world. The U.S. population is only 4% of the world's population, and it had over half the wealth. We generated it through private property and liberty and inventiveness and rugged individualism. And we're now losing that engine. We are now collapsing. California is collapsing. They're going to 4-day-a-week school. They're laying off half the cops in major cities. I talk to people that I know in California where they say major roads get washed out. They just shut them and say, that's it, no more road. They're announcing they're not going to fix the sidewalks anymore. We're imploding into a third world country, ladies and gentlemen, and now third world groups are being harnessed into political weapons, being led by this thug Calderon up here saying, I've got to have my guns banned because he says so. No one ever puts up with this type of foreign meddling in their country. And this is the wake-up call to everybody to exactly what Mexico represents, a narco-terrorist failed state with huge impoverished third world people being used as a political weapon by the globalists to bring in the North American Union and the New World Order.